Welcome to the I Can Do Anything podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have a full slate of NBA free agency talk as the free agency period comes to a close with a blockbuster trade between Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook, the Houston Rockets and the Oklahoma City Thunder. But because I can do anything, I'd first like to tell you about Beat Freak. Today's episode of the I Can Do Anything podcast is brought to you by Beat Freak. When it comes to making beats, you don't need a sophisticated beat-making software. You don't even need instruments. With powerful technology that has an array of instruments to choose from, you never have to use a tinny-sounding snare snippet or a dull guitar riff again. The latest in synthesizer and electronic production components comes at an affordable price with Beat Freak. Visit beatfreak.com/anything for your limited time offer at amazing professional quality sounding instruments at your fingertips. Don't be a freak. Get Beat Freak. Okay, so before I talk about Russell Westbrook and Chris Paul's blockbuster trade between the Houston Rockets and the Oklahoma City Thunder, I want to first talk about the LeBron move to point guard that I predicted last week. I don't know that I necessarily predicted it, but it was something that was it seems like it was kind of in the air. It wasn't necessarily talked about, but it almost seemed inevitable. So the Lakers announced earlier this week that LeBron would move to point guard. I take that back. It was announced by Yahoo Sports' Chris Haynes. And then Frank Vogel was asked to comment on it. And he said there's been no decision on LeBron starting at point guard and that it's too early to decide or make determinations on who will start and where. So he downplayed the fact that LeBron would start, but didn't necessarily rule it out, and also didn't rule out that JaVale McGee would start or not. Although I think that the report that I'm reading may have come before. Oh no, this is from July 12 on Bleacher Report. So I don't think JaVale McGee's not starting. I don't think JaVale McGee starts over DeMarcus Cousins or Anthony Davis. Certainly not over Anthony Davis. But the Lakers also added Avery Bradley to their roster. I think a huge, huge pickup. I get really worried after this Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook trade that LA is going to make a stupid, because it's been reported that Chris Paul's not going to play a single second in Oklahoma City. And I get really worried that the Lakers are going to make a stupid move and get rid of some of these, I think, really good pieces, good bench guard play pieces that I just worry that they're gonna get rid of some of these guys to get Chris Paul, just because of that narrative and that almost fantasy of LeBron and Chris Paul playing together. I could see the Lakers making some stupid move and getting rid of like Bradley, Pope, and a first-round draft pick for Chris Paul, or like I'm looking at a roster right now on lineups.com because all the NBA and ESPN rosters are still reflective of last season. I don't know why the NBA and ESPN doesn't update those as these free agents make their official signings. So I don't know how reliable this lineups.com is. But they say that Lance Stevenson is also on the roster in this updated roster. I don't know if that's accurate, but I just worry that they're going to make a stupid move and get rid of some of these, I think, really good young pieces and try to add an old, aged, horrible contract Chris Paul. I really like the adding of Avery Bradley. I think he's a great perimeter defender, and he can be a capable scorer like when absolutely needed on those days where, maybe two of the three stars between AD, LeBron, and Boogie are doing, maybe two of the three of them are doing load management, taking a night off when that other one isn't on the court, or just in a big moment. Avery Bradley can be a pretty good driving scorer. He's a good 3-and-D guy. I really, really love this Avery Bradley signing. And the rumblings are are not really rumblings anymore. Like, I think a lot of people are excited about this roster. It's a pretty stacked roster. I don't know about stacked. It just feels good. It feels good. I feel good about this roster the way I did last season going into the season, and this roster may be better. I think it's younger. I think it's a better shooting lineup, and that was sorely missed and needed last season was shooting. I'm really high on this Lakers roster. A couple of other free agency acquisitions that were made, transactions that were made in this past week. The Hawks picked up Jabari Parker for 2 years, $13 million. The Hawks really have an interesting young roster. The Hawks had a good draft and have made a couple decent free agent acquisitions, and the Hawks could be like a nice like fringe NBA playoff team in the East. Of course, they're an NBA playoff team. I meant to say playoff team in the East. The Hawks have like this doesn't mean anything. I'm just talking to talk at this exact moment in time. The Hawks are going to be a more than likely fringe playoff team. Like, they more than likely don't make the playoffs, but the Hawks are going to be an interesting league pass watch. Hawks like Kings will be a really good league pass game. Two young rosters that are, that both won't make the playoffs, but are going to be really fun to watch. The Thunder also, before making that Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook traded Jeremy Grant to Denver for a 2020 first-round pick. The Thunder are loaded on first-round future draft picks. And I think that's a good move for Denver. They didn't give anything up, and they got a good utility for kind of like swing three. So Jeremy Grant's more of a four, but a good rim protector, runs the floor well, can finish in transition. That's another good piece for a Denver team that is going to be really damn good. And I think even though they had a lot of success last season, is going to surprise people again this season. It won't be as big of a surprise. I don't think the league necessarily expected Denver to be as good as they were, but Jokic had a breakout year, Murray had a breakout year, and I think they're going to have even better seasons this coming season. And I think that Jeremy Grant acquisition is a good one. He's just a good utility bench guy. They've got a lot of good bench guards, and this adds to their depth in the front court. The Warriors waived Sean Livingston. He's going to be a integral piece on a contender come the trade deadline. His contract's gonna get, I don't know what that necessarily means. Let me look that up. What is waiving Sean Livingston? Steve Kerr explains why the Warriors will miss Livingston so much. Okay, then why'd you waive him? Warriors waive Sean Livingston. Should Warriors fans be concerned after losing Iguodala and Sean Livingston? That's a viable question. I mean, those were two important veteran pieces for the Warriors, and I think losing those guys, especially because both of those guys will go and more than likely end up on playoff teams, probably in the West. I could see Sean Livingston going to Houston maybe and being a nice piece for Houston. He could be a great piece for Portland, who has lost a little bit. I think it's a little bit underrated how many people and how much depth Portland has lost. And then they took on Hassan Whiteside, who, his contract is expiring at the end of the season, and that was basically to use as a trade piece come the trade deadline, or just to have him off the books come next free agency, although the next free agency period is not going to be nearly what this one was. But yeah, the Warriors, it's a legitimate gripe for Warriors fans. They've lost kind of a lot in veteran role player pieces. They lost Jordan Bell as well. They got rid of their big guy, that big young Damian Jones, they got rid of him. I think he went to Miami. So I don't know. The Warriors are going to be fine. I think the Warriors are still a top 5 team in the West, and they're going to surprise people a lot this year. But I think in the playoffs, when those veteran guys, when those veteran role pieces are needed, Warriors fans are definitely going to miss Sean Livingston and Iguodala, and more than likely, they're going to miss him a lot more because they could very well be playing against him come the playoffs, whether they go to Portland or LA. Like Sean Livingston would be an incredible piece in LA if they were to buy out his contract. Same with Iguodala. That just adds more veteran leadership to an already. LA's got a really good mix of veteran superstars, veteran young stars, veteran role player. I mean, there's a lot in LA that I'm really excited about in terms of their roster. In other news, KD, in other Warriors news, Kevin Durant, as these free agency signings happen, everything early, like last week, at the beginning of the free agency period, all of it was just reported contracts. And now guys are signing their actual contracts. One notable one was Kawhi signing a 3-year with a player option instead of the reported 4-year contract. So he signed a 3-year with a player option after the second year. So him and Paul George's contracts will line up, and more than likely they'll both opt into that player option or opt out of that player option and become free agents in 2 years. And could do something together or go somewhere separately depending on what happens in these next 2 years. But that's an interesting kind of acquisition or sort of development as these free agents go from reported contracts to actually signing their contracts. So as that happened with the Warriors and as that happened with KD's contract, he made the Warriors add a first-round pick because he didn't like the notion of being traded straight up for D'Angelo Russell. This just adds more fuel to the fire for the KD being a little pussy boy bitch. I really haven't talked about that too much, and really I don't really put too much into that. I think a lot of the guys in the NBA now are pretty sensitive. I think a lot of superstars in general, athletes in general, across the decades have been pretty sensitive, and I think it's just magnified now because of the 24-hour news cycle and social media. I think Jordan, in a lot of ways, is really sensitive. Just go back to his Hall of Fame speech. You know, a lot of NBA players have always been really sensitive. So I've never really bought into that too much, but this just adds more fuel to the fire for that narrative for KD. Like, he's just, I don't know, man. I mean, it's a good acquisition. It's a nice piece because when he comes back, I don't know what year that first round pick is for, but that'll be a nice little future thing for the Nets to maybe get some young talent as KD comes back in the near future. I don't remember I think KD's contract was a 4-year contract. I'm not sure if there was a player option after that third year or not. But it's a good little acquisition. It's a good little move on Durant's part, but there's also that hint of KD's insecurities. And when I read that at first, I thought of D'Angelo Russell. What do you think if you're D'Angelo Russell reading that? Like, obviously D'Angelo Russell knows that Kevin Durant's better than he is, but if I'm D'Angelo Russell, I look at that and be like, what, man? You got a fucking problem with me, man? Like, really, you think that low of me? Obviously, it's not that low because Kevin Durant's far and away way better than D'Angelo Russell, but that would just sort of, I'm sure that rubs D'Angelo Russell the wrong way. And even if it doesn't, just the next time that he interacts with Kevin Durant, you know, off the court, like the next time they see each other at some event or some, you know, at All-Star Weekend or whatever it is, the next time the Nets and the Warriors play each other, it's just another like added little piece of tension that kind of it's not going to be a rivalry. Trust me, the Brooklyn Nets and the Warriors aren't going to play enough to be a rivalry, but that game will be nationally televised when even this season when the Nets and the Warriors play for the first time without Durant. But it's going to be a big nationally televised, a big event when Durant comes back next season and plays the Nets. Other contract stuff that happened, Ben Simmons, this was from early in the week. I'm not sure if it was finalized or not. But Ben Simmons, it was reported that he was going to sign a contract extension for 5 years, $170 million over 5 years, 34 per. Ben Simmons contract extension. Let's see if this thing went through. Ben Simmons and 76ers working on 5-year, $170 million max contract extension. This story is on CBS from July 2nd. That's kind of old. So it seems like maybe it hasn't happened yet. But if the 76ers, I mean, it sounds like they offered it to him, and he's just deciding whether or not he wants to sign it. But what a horrible contract. Why would you offer Ben Simmons a 5-year, $170 million max contract and pay this guy $34 million a year for the next 5 years? I just think it's so stupid. Like, the guy can't shoot. This is basketball. Ben Simmons is a great distributor. He's a great conductor of the game of basketball. And if he's got shooters completely lined around him, which they don't in Philadelphia, then maybe it's one thing. But even if that's the case, like, those shooters that you've got around him more than likely don't have the same 5-year contract that he does. That'd be impossible because pretty much only the stars sign these long 5-year max contracts or 5-year contracts at all. These role players and second tier guys don't sign 5-year contracts, and if they do, it's for much less money. But even if you've got them surrounded by players, they're not going to be on that same 5-year contract. So eventually, they're probably, unless you re-sign them, and unless things go really well, unless they're winning championships and they want to just re-sign everybody and keep the band all together, which never happens in the NBA. There's almost never a core group of players that stays together for more than 4 years in the NBA. I think it's a terrible signing to sign a guy that can't shoot the ball. He just, like, as your main ball handler, you've got to be able to shoot. You have to at least be a threat to take a fucking shot, let alone a threat to make a shot. But he won't even shoot threes. I think he is literally. I don't think he's shot a 3 in his NBA career. I feel like I remember him taking 1 in the regular season last year. But a horrible signing for the 76ers if this max contract extension does go through for Ben Simmons. So I already talked about Kawhi Leonard and Paul George's contracts lining up. Zion Williamson got hurt at Summer League, at the beginning of the Summer League. He played 9 minutes. I talked about that in a previous episode. I was just kind of, over the week, kind of mulling over the idea of Zion Williamson being this everything that he is for the league. People talking about him being the next LeBron, and he is essentially this next generational talent. There was Magic, and then Jordan, and then Kobe, and then LeBron, and now Zion. I don't even necessarily think I'd put Kobe as a generational, like, physical specimen type talent, but what he materialized to be was a multi NBA champion and one of the greatest players to ever play in the NBA. But Zion is being dubbed as this next NBA generational talent, and ESPN. An ESPN senior writer, Baxter Holmes, put out a 2-part series on ESPN.com about the youth being very, very fragile, and the whole crisis of youth basketball. And the second part references Zion Williamson, and him being hurt at Summer League. I don't remember. I read the first part. I haven't read the second part. I'm gonna do a full episode coming this week on part 1 and part 2 of that article. I know he was referenced in part 2, but I'm not sure if the articles were written before he got hurt at Summer League. But it's just kind of an interesting little tidbit, something to think about going forward, whether or not Zion's body is going to be able to handle the workload that he's going to have in New Orleans, and just the abuse that he's going to put on his body in the NBA with all that weight and all that athleticism. So the NBA also released or reported news of the new coaches challenge, which I think is really stupid. I'm going to talk about that on the other side of this quick little commercial break for Slump. The I Can Do Anything podcast is brought to you by Slump, Dave Jarzina's debut novel, a tale of a 13-year-old named Mitchie Evers who's at odds with every single person in his life, including his friends, and old reliable best buddy Sammy no longer seem to appreciate Mitchie's sparkling wit. His parents are so busy gushing over his perfect older brother that they don't have time for Mitchie. One by one, he alienates his best friend, family, teachers, and former soccer coach with his bullheadedness and his inappropriate and ill-timed sense of humor. With his penchant for hurting and insulting people, Mitchie makes a convincing jerk. He knows that he's a little too young to be in a serious slump, but what can he do about it? Purchase the book that countless readers recommend anywhere that you buy books, whether it's Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Audible, Apple Books, Google Play, or wherever you purchase books. Slump by Dave Jarzina's debut novel. Go get it today. So the NBA did this fucking stupid. This coach's challenge thing is so dumb. It's so stupid. Like, what's the point? If you want all these calls to be made correctly, then just make them correctly. I have talked at length about how stupid I think the current review process is. And this just adds another element that's going to slow the game down even more. It's just not necessary. Just have a guy have two head refs, one on the court, one in the replay center, and the head ref on the court wears an earpiece, and after a play happens and the guy's foot was on the line, on the three-point line, and the head ref raises his hand and swirls his finger around to notify that we're going to review the play, or with that position in place, you don't even need to do that. Even if you do it, he raises his hand in the air, which signals to the replay center that we want to review it. The guy reviews it really quick, and while he's down on the other end of the court, or maybe while he's running back to the other end of the court, the guy says, "Yeah, you're right. His foot was on the line. At the next dead ball, we'll take the points off." It's that fucking simple. But instead, the NBA is adding a coach's challenge. Adam Silver is a brilliant guy. I think he's done a lot of really, really great stuff. I've talked about a lot of the really great stuff that I think Adam Silver is doing in the NBA. But this just, I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's fucking useless. So now coaches can challenge an on-court decision once per game, provided that they have a timeout remaining. The plays that can be challenged include called fouls, goaltending, basket interference, and disputed out-of-bounds calls, which matches the plays automatically eligible for official review in the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter or during overtime, with the exception being called fouls, which is kind of it's just like a little wrinkle. Dude, this is so stupid. So to signal that they want a review of a given play, coaches would immediately call a timeout and then give the NBA's universal gesture for review. Like I said earlier, the swirl above the head. It's just really dumb. Like, what's the point? If you're going to, they should almost just use it. They should almost, it seems like a theatrical thing. Like they want to sort of do what the NFL's done. You might as well just throw the flag the same way that the NFL does. I don't know. It's just really dumb. It's just really stupid. The review thing is just, it's just going to, I don't know what the hell the point of it is. Adam Silver's too smart for this. I just think, I mean, SB Nation calls it useless. NBC Sports says that the NBA Coaches Challenge will make basketball slower and duller. Video reviews turn what should be dynamic and ephemeral entertainment into a moral crusade to get absolutely everything right. And it's not even the best way to get absolutely everything right. Just get everything right rather than making, it's almost like they're adding a timeout. It's almost like they're adding another like strategical caveat to the NBA by letting coaches review a play. And I don't even know if there's a stipulation like you lose a timeout if you get the review wrong. But it's like they're adding a strategical element for coaches. And it's not even, it doesn't even necessarily make, it's not even, I just think it's really dumb. I could ramble about it forever. I'm going to move on though to some other trade talks that I think are really interesting as the Russell Westbrook trade went through. It kind of leaves the trade thing open, sort of, with the potential for Chris Paul to be moved. So there's been reports that Kyle Lowry, Marc Gasol, and Serge Ibaka could all be on the trading block with the potential Raptors rebuild. I don't think it's necessarily time for the Raptors to blow it up. I mean, they're not going to win another title. Certainly not this year. Probably not in the next 10 years. But I don't necessarily think it's time to blow it up. I think they've still got a lot of really great pieces with Ibaka, Gasol, and Lowry, especially because Gasol and Lowry, and I think Ibaka, all come off the books next season. They could make a move for, they don't need Chris Paul by any way, shape, or form, but they could make a move for Chris Paul. Some other openings are Kevin Love. So this CBS Sports report mentions Love being mentioned in Portland Trailblazers talk. If the Trailblazers are willing to get rid of Zach Collins, Anthony Simmons, and Nasir Little in a deal, and maybe a future first-round pick, I think Cleveland would probably listen to that. The CBS Sports report says that that's a lot to give up, but Portland is right there, and Love would make them a legitimate title contender. I don't even think that's a lot to give up. I think Zach Collins is a younger, probably not as good version of Kevin Love as like kind of a mobile stretch four. Zach Collins sometimes plays 5, but Kevin Love's got the experience factor. He's got championship pedigree with the Cavs championship under his belt with LeBron. And Anthony Simmons and Nasir Little, really, I don't even know who those guys are. I don't think that's a lot to give up for Portland. I think that it would be a great move for Portland. Love would also make sense with the Celtics after losing Al Horford. He'd also be a really good fit for Golden State to kind of go alongside with Draymond Green and Kevon Looney and just be kind of another rotational guy for their front court after they lost, obviously, Kevin Durant in the front court. So I think there's a lot of interesting moves for Kevin Love in between now and the NBA season, and between now and the trade deadline in the upcoming season. Bradley Beal, I think it will be on the trading block. The Wizards have certainly made it pretty public that they're committed to keeping Beal, but he's 26 years old and a really great young defender, a great scorer, a really good perimeter shooter. Bradley Beal could be an incredible piece to, a team that's one guy away. He could be a really, really awesome piece I don't know. He could be a great piece for a lot of even teams in the East. Like if he went to the Pistons, he could be a nice piece for the Pistons. If they were, there was talks a couple years ago, and even last free agency period, last off season about Draymond going to the Pistons potentially at the end of his contract. And if he were to go to the Pistons to play with, they're not going to win. I don't see them as a title contender with these three, but with Bradley Beal, Draymond Green, Blake Griffin, and then even throw in Andre Drummond in there, that is a really good starting four. And then they've got Reggie. I think they still have Reggie Jackson as their starting point guard. That is a damn good starting five. Bradley Beal could be an interesting piece if he were to go to the Pistons. Now they'd have to lose some pieces. Maybe Reggie Jackson would be in that deal. But if Bradley Beal were to go to the Pistons, that could be an enticing move for Draymond Green to go there in free agency next year when his contract is up. So look for Bradley Beal to be on the trading block. This CBS Sports article also has Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, and Drew Holiday as potential trade block moves for the Pelicans. They could either stick to that very young core with Lonzo Ball and Ingram being the eldest of the young core, followed by Zion with JJ Redick as their kind of veteran shooter, but they could stick to that young core and maybe deal Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday would be an incredible trade piece to pretty much any team that, like Bradley Beal, is a one guy away playoff contender type of team. Or they could keep Beal and maybe deal some of those other pieces to get a guy like Bradley Beal. Like maybe Bradley Beal could go to the Pelicans and they could trade away Lonzo Ball and Brandon Ingram and maybe some first-round draft picks or maybe a couple other young pieces. Maybe add Hart in there. You could go Ingram and Hart so they could keep Ball and Drew Holiday and have Lonzo Ball, Drew Holiday, Zion, and Bradley Beal. So there's a lot of really interesting trade options still out there. D'Angelo Russell will be a trade piece for the Warriors. That one's pretty obvious and pretty highly documented. Gordon Hayward could be an interesting trade piece for Oklahoma City, maybe for Houston, for Orlando even. Orlando could move off of Mo Bamba and Evan Fournier, who are two pretty good pieces. Mo Bamba's a young big who I don't see being even an all-star in the NBA, but he could be a good piece as he develops. Evan Fournier had a great season last year for the Magic and was a pretty reliable, just a good distributor and good scorer for the Magic. He could be a piece for the Magic to trade for potentially Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward could be an interesting piece depending on how, I don't think anything happens with Gordon Hayward now, but depending on how he plays at the beginning of the season, he could be an interesting trade piece for the Celtics. They could decide to keep him if he's playing really well, or if he's playing well, but they don't think maybe he's going to be help them be a contender, which I don't think the Celtics are. The Celtics in no way, with their current roster, with the new look roster, they're in no way a title contender. Now, if they were to maybe trade for Steven Adams and get rid of Hayward, that certainly adds to it. I don't know. The Celtics are in no way a title contender in my opinion, but Gordon Hayward is going to be an interesting trade piece. So yeah, even though free agency has sort of winded down, there still could be not necessarily free agent moves, but there still could be some trade moves that happen over the remainder of the offseason. So there's certainly going to be a lot to talk about still. I do want to talk about this wage gap thing that's happening with FIFA. It's a really interesting kind of, I just find the whole situation to be really interesting. However, I do want to talk to the homeowners out there first. Are you a homeowner? Landscaped is here to help. If you own a home, in most cases, you know that you're going to have some yard work. Landscaped is here to help, taking pride in having the most extensive catalog of outdoor tools, appliances, furniture, lighting, materials, decor, power supplies, pool and spa, gardening, recreation, water and irrigation, accessories, and more. Visit our stores across the United States to receive help from our trained landscape architects, take classes and listen to seminars on a wide variety of topics and focus areas, including Gardening 101, homeowners construction best practices, insect and pest control and behavior, creative materials concepts, pool and spa maintenance, fencing and perimeter design, owning your space, and many, many more. Or visit us online at landscaped.com/anything. To receive $10 off a order of $50 or more, or $50 off an order of $300 or more. That's landscaped.com/anything, a special savings for listeners of the I Can Do Anything podcast. Before I talk about the FIFA thing, Rob Pelinka made a really stupid comment, in my opinion. Rob Pelinka, Lakers GM, says that the Lakers learned from their free agency mistakes last season and that anything short of a championship is not a success. Rob Pelinka, of course that's the case. Of course. Everybody fucking knows that. But why would you say it? That really pissed me off earlier. I think it was yesterday I got that notification. And it's just, you just don't need to say it. Everybody fucking knows it, and I just don't like that he said it. It doesn't really matter, but I just think it's a stupid... Rob Pelinka got a lot of flack at the beginning, like before the AD trade, before any of these moves happened. Rob Pelinka was getting a lot of flack after Magic Johnson went on First Take and criticized the Lakers organization, and they've pulled it together really, really well. So I don't want to give Rob Pelinka too much shit, but I thought it was just kind of stupid to put that out. Everybody knows that. Like, I just don't think you need to say it. So this FIFA thing is interesting to me. So at the parade in New York, FIFA Federation President of U.S. Soccer, Carlos Cordero, sort of hid behind a statement that he made on stage. He said, U.S. soccer has invested more in women's soccer than any country in the world. Now, obviously that's true. The United States is, by far the wealthiest country in the world. We have by far the most progressive standards as far as employment for women, as far as women's rights in general. We are far and away, the standard. There's certainly a lot of other first world countries that have great quality of life for women. Women can vote in a lot of other countries, but there's also a lot of other countries out there that don't let their women do anything. Saudi Arabia just let women start driving, and I want to say I heard something recently that may have not gone through, or that may not pass, and that women may not be able to drive in Saudi Arabia. I could be materializing that in my head. But it was an interesting statement to say that, because obviously the United States invests more in women's soccer than any country in the world. Our women's soccer players are full-time women's soccer players. These other countries, a lot of the teams that they're playing, these girls have other full-time jobs. Like the Netherlands, they probably don't. England, those girls probably already all play professionally. So the teams that they played in the final and then the semifinal they're legit good women's soccer teams, and those countries have pretty much always been good at women's soccer, as far as I know. But it was an interesting thing for him to say, to kind of just hide behind that fact, only because of the fact that the women actually make more in terms of revenue, the percentage of revenue that they earn. So the president, Carlos Cordero, he said that statement, U.S. soccer has invested more in women's soccer than any country in the world. That's obvious. And he's sort of hiding behind that statement with the knowledge of the revenue and how the percentages are paid out. He also said that was quoted, fair and equitable pay, which isn't the same as fair and equal pay. And I think he said that because he knows about this he obviously knows about this revenue discrepancy. So there was news. This article is from 2018, a Forbes article it was originally from 2018, and it's from March 7, 2019. When I originally read this, I could have sworn it said 2018. But it reads, news today that France earned $38 million from FIFA for winning the Soccer World Cup. That's the Men's World Cup in Russia 2 years ago, I believe. While the women's champion in France this summer will earn just $4 million. The one that the women just won. So the total prize money for the Women's World Cup in France this July will be $30 million compared with total prize money of $440 million for the men's. So the men receive a lot more in prize money. And that's estimated $440 million for the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. The difference between the men's and women's prize money is ridiculous, said Tatjana Hayani, who oversaw women's soccer for FIFA before stepping down in 2017. It's really disappointing that the gap between women's and men's World Cups gets bigger, and it sends the wrong message. However, as Dwight Jaynes pointed out 4 years ago, after the U.S. women beat Japan to capture the World Cup in Vancouver, there was a big difference in the revenue available to pay teams. So, the women, after the Women's World Cup brought in almost $73 million, of which the players got 13%. And the 2010 Men's World Cup in South Africa made almost $4 billion. So that's $73 million for the women and $4 billion. $4 billion for the men. More than 3 times the revenue, of which those players got 9%. So the women brought in $73 million and got 13% of that $73 million, and the men brought in $4 billion and received 9% of that $4 billion. So actually, the men are paid less, which it's just an interesting. It says a lot about the character of these people who. These girls are smart girls, and this is an article, and this is something that I started looking into on Monday, I believe, when the parade happened. And then, as many of you know, any of the very few listeners that listen to this podcast know, I'm a huge Andrew Schulz fan and a big fan of Flagrant 2 podcast and The Brilliant Idiots. And Schulz talked about this actually after I had already looked into it and planned on talking about it. But these girls are smart. These girls aren't stupid, and they know they must have sat down with FIFA and said, listen, why are we making less money? And these people probably explained to them that, like, hey, the men, they pull in a lot more money and you actually receive a higher percentage. So the women, that 13% of $73 million equals about $9.5 million that's paid out to the various, teams get paid a certain amount if they win, and a certain amount if they finish second, and a certain amount if they finish third and fourth and fifth. I don't know how many teams end up getting money, but the overall payout, that 13% is $9.5 million for women, and the overall payout for men, that 9% of $4 billion equals $360 million that go to the teams. So it says something about these girls that, like, they continue to push. There's no wage gap. It doesn't exist. The women actually get paid more in terms of percentage, which is how money and revenue works. You're paid a percentage of revenue. The percentage of if the revenue fluctuates between men's and women's, which it does, whoever gets the higher percentage is being paid more, and the women are actually paid more than the men. Now, their sum total isn't as much as the men, but that's because they don't bring in revenue. If the women want to get paid, then the other women that don't play, if women want women to get paid, then fucking watch. You clearly don't watch. There's more women in the world than men. So watch the Women's World Cup, and the women will bring in more revenue, and in turn, they'll get paid a higher dollar amount than the men. But currently, they're paid higher in terms of the percentage of revenue that they earn. So I just think that says a lot about the character of these women, and it's just weird. Like, why do you continue to push this narrative of the gender wage gap in America when they fucking know? They know. They're not stupid. Trust me, those women know. The episode of the I Can Do Anything podcast that you're currently listening to is brought to you by Standard Process. Since 1992, Standard Process has been dedicated to the field of nutritional supplements and the whole food philosophy introduced by Dr. Royal Lee. With Standard Process supplements, you will discover just how resilient your body can be when given the proper nutrition. Standard Process supplements contain time-tested formulas with whole food ingredients that provide safe, effective, high-quality nutritional support. Available through healthcare professionals, our products promote a better quality of life for our customers. So my uncle is a chiropractor and owns his own chiropractic practice and is a supplier of Standard Process supplements. And throughout my life, it's worked miracles after many different physical setbacks. I'm currently taking myotrophin for some ligament soreness in my neck, and it's helping quite a bit. I've taken a number of different Standard Process supplements like Adrenal Complex, Biost, Ostrophin, SP Cleanse, Thymex, Inostol, inositol, I think is how you say it. AF Beta Food, Catalin is basically like a daily multivitamin that has a lot of vitamin A, vitamin B, and a lot of just the things that are necessary for your body in the amounts that you would never take. You can't eat 12 bananas to get the potassium that your body needs. And a lot of these supplements pack all that nutrients into small little tablets, so that your body can perform the way that you need it to, whether you're an athlete or a regular Jane Doe. Standard Process supplements have what you need. Thanks for listening to the I Can Do Anything podcast today. I will be back next week to read part 1. I'm not sure if I'm going to do part 1 and part 2 of this Baxter Holmes ESPN article about the youth basketball crisis in America. I'm not sure whether I'm going to do it in 2 different episodes, but next week I will do episodes dedicated to the youth basketball crisis article by Baxter Holmes of ESPN. I think it's a really interesting 2-part series, just a great read, and I think it's something that any athlete can relate to, whether you specialized in basketball or a different sport. I certainly can. I think I may try to get Addison Dobb in on the conversation, and I may try to get in Beatty as well, who is a former college basketball athlete. We all dealt with injuries, so it's something that everybody can relate to, and I think a really fascinating article about the and how the NBA is handling it and what it means for the NBA in the future. Thanks for listening again to the I Can Do Anything podcast. Have a great weekend. Peace.